All right, good evening, scholars. Tonight, your homework for history class is a homework assignment titled Homework The Loyalist. I'll give you about 30 seconds to get it open. As you get that homework assignment open in the last couple of seconds, I'd just like to remind you the full expectation is use the complete plan of attack on this reading, even though it is a history reading. You still completely jot and provide a roadmap of jots. You still answer the central question at the end of the lesson. And if you at any point need a couple more seconds to finish up your jot, or you would like to listen to a section, you can always pause the recording or go earlier back in the video to reread a section. Mastery of understanding is the goal. The goal is not simply to get through the document, but to understand it as well. So I'm going to get started. Again, the title of the document is Homework, The Loyalists. Your central question is asking, why did some Americans remain loyal to the British Empire? Page 2, The Loyalists. The following article, The Loyalists, was adapted from the Independence Hall Association in Philadelphia. The year is 1774. Whether you are a merchant in Massachusetts or a German-born farmer living in Pennsylvania, a tavern-owning woman of Maryland, or a slave owner in the South, you share some things in common. For instance, you probably don't like paying taxes on goods like tea that wind up going to support the royal coffers or the royal money chest in London. There is no actual money chest. It is simply saying you might not like paying taxes that end up supporting Britain and not the colonies. At the same time, you like the notion of being part of the British Empire, the most powerful empire in the world. 30 seconds, jot. Ten seconds. Chances are you speak English and have many British relatives or ancestors. Or even if you're a German farmer with no ties to Britain, you are still grateful for the opportunity to farm peacefully in this British-ruled land. Yet, you hear whispers, radical notions, radical ideas about separating from Britain are making the rounds. The hotheads or aggressives in Boston have already begun open war or open battle, and the Continental Congress, the group of delegates sent to Pennsylvania to decide such legal problems, have declared the colonies independent of Great Britain. Whom will you support? The radical Americans or the British? 30 seconds, shot. Ten more seconds on the jot. Fact is, it was not an easy decision for many Americans. Not only would their way of life be drastically affected, but whomever they choose to side with would make instant enemies or friends, neighbors, and even family. Any full assessment of the American Revolution must try to understand the place of loyalists, also known as Tories, or those Americans who remained faithful to the British Empire during the war. 30 seconds, jot. 10 seconds. Although Loyalists were strong in their commitment to remain within the British Empire, it was a very hard decision to make and to stick to during the Revolution. Even before the war started, a group of Philadelphia Quakers were arrested and imprisoned in Virginia because of their perceived or assumed support of the British. The Patriots were not a tolerant group, and the Loyalists suffered regular harassment, had their property seized, or were subject to personal attacks. 30 seconds, stop. Ten seconds on the clock. The process of tar and feathering, for example, was brutally violent. Stripped of clothes, covered with hot tar, and splattered with feathers, the victim was then forced to parade about in public. Unless the British Army was close at hand to protect Loyalists, they often suffered bad treatment from Patriots and often had to flee their own homes. About 1 in 6 Americans was an active Loyalist during the Revolution, and that number undoubtedly would have been higher if the Patriots hadn't been so successful in threatening and punishing people who made their Loyalist sympathies known in public. 30 seconds, stop. One famous Loyalist, Thomas Hutchinson, a leading Boston merchant from an old American family, served as governor of Massachusetts. Because he was viewed as pro-British by some citizens of Boston, his house was burned in 1765 by an angry crowd protesting the Crown's policy. In 1774, Hutchinson left America for London, where he died in 1780, in exile from his American homeland. One of his letters suggested his sad end, for he had rather die in a little country farmhouse in New England than in the best nobleman's seat in Old England. Like his ancestor, Anne Hutchinson, who suffered religious persecution from Puritan authorities in the 1600s, the Hutchinson family suffered severe punishment for holding beliefs that other Americans rejected. 30 seconds, chop. Perhaps the most interesting group of Loyalists were enslaved Africans who chose to join the British. The British promised to liberate enslaved peoples who fled from Patriot owners. Again, the British promised to free slaves who ran from Patriot owners. This powerful incentive and the opportunities opened by the chaos of war led some 50,000 slaves, or about 10% of the total enslaved population in the 1770s, to flee or run. When the war ended, the British evacuated 20,000 formerly enslaved African Americans and resettled them as free people. Along with this group of Black Loyalists, about 80,000 other Loyalists chose to leave the independent United States after the Patriot victory in order to remain members of the British Empire. 30 seconds, Ja. All right, my loves and lives. You have finished listening and reading to this homework assignment. Your job now is to answer the central question: why did some Americans remain loyal to the British Empire? With a strong and clear claim. A great claim always flips the question, answers the question, and tells your reader why, and is always read out loud by the scholar at least twice to check for clarity and strength. If you have any questions, please email or reach out to your teacher. And thanks so much for working so hard. See you tomorrow.